Warm welcome back to my channel. For those of you reading the title, you know today is going to be a little bit controversial, but that's okay. This is something that I've been thinking of for um, dealing with, I guess is a better word, for quite a while now, probably 2 years since this whole contradiction thing started. And for those of you who are like, what the hell are you talking about? What's contradictions? I've never heard people say that. Lucky you, you're not on the side of the internet where contradictions has turned into this way of abusing people and showing your power that you know what's right and they don't, and they're wrong and they're uneducated, right? For those of you who are watching this and do know what it is, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And for those of you who are the perpetrators of this watching this, I'm glad you made it to my video. That was the entire point of making this, so welcome. I hope you listened to the whole thing. So, where do we begin? What are contradictions? What are people talking about when they say, your type contradicts? Your two types contradict. They don't make sense together. You can't be an ENFJ and a 1. What do they mean? Right? What are they talking about? Why would they say that? Well, what they're saying is your types can't exist, and that there's a reason that they can't exist together. Now, a lot of people make the mistake of saying why. Well, why is that not true? I know myself, and it makes sense to me. I relate to each one of these types, yada yada. And what they're going to do is send you a description of the type, right? Or something that you've never seen or never heard of that's lost in a source somewhere that they managed to dig up, that this teacher or this authority on that system said in 1976 or 1994 or 1950 or sometime long, long ago, right? So what do we call this? People that know logic and reason. What do we call this, right? We call this appeal to authority, appeal to naturalism, appeal to the past. And the biggest one that we're going to go over today is the fallacy of composition and division, which is what the majority of these people are using, not realizing it, when they screech about contradictions. So, this is what the people are telling you when they say you have a contradicting type. They're saying Naranjo in 1976 wrote these two sentences that say, you know, Enneagram 3s are yada yada yada, or that 7s don't ever pay attention to their feelings. So if you're a feeling type, you can't be a 7. Or whatever they're saying. These are just examples. There's so many that they use, and it follows a pattern. And I'm here to show you, the listener, what are the patterns? Why are they doing it? And hopefully convincing you to recognize that contradictions between systems are bullshit 99% of the time. There is a way that they're not bullshit, and we will go over that in this video. So, first things first. Why are these people incorrect when they spout this nonsense? The first reason is they do not look at the core components of the system when making supposed contradictions. Okay? What does that mean? If this person sends you a link to a source that is describing the entirety of a type, it's a description of impressions and behaviors of a type, which all systems use. They're not looking at the core components that make up that type. They're looking at how the author described a manifestation that you can recognize as an archetype of that type. That is not the most important part of a type. So if you're looking at the hierarchy of what matters in a type, what's going to be at the top, right? The top of the hierarchy. So at the top of the hierarchy in this instance is what you see. It's what things look like. It's what appears to be the impression. It's not the supporting part of the hierarchy that actually matters. And at the very, very top is going to be descriptions and impressions of types, of entire types, right? So the description of EVLF, the description of ENFJ, the description of 8 with a 9 wing, the description of 8, the description of sexual, right? These are the very top of the hierarchy. At the very bottom, the supporting, the base, the core meaning of a hierarchy, the one that matters the most, that supports the entire theory, is the core component. What is it about? What's happening? That's what matters most. That's what determines your type. This top part up here, that doesn't determine your type. That gives you a hint towards what your type might be, because this is a common behavioral manifestation of the type. It does matter, or else it wouldn't be on the hierarchy, but it does not matter as much as the bottom of the hierarchy, which is the core components of the type. That's what you want to look for when you're trying to figure out your type. So this is part of the reason why people who are so hell-bent on contradictions aren't giving you accurate and truthful information when they tell you these two types contradict. Not true. You don't know that. They might not contradict. You might be a different manifestation of that type than was commonly known by Naranjo in 1972. You might be a different version of what he wrote about in 1996. You might be a different version than what he wrote about, different manifestation of what he wrote about that got translated through his SAT group in 2006 and then got translated by somebody else who speaks English as a second language, and then it comes to you, and now this person is telling you, here's these two sentences that I have that are contradicting what you're saying about yourself as an ENFJ. You can't be this in Enneagram. You see where this can go wrong? I challenge you as the viewer, or you as the person that's here who believes in contradictions wholeheartedly. I challenge you to figure out what's wrong with that picture. Because it's very obvious once you start to make the connections here. So, we've got one part of it, the puzzle figured out, which is the core components of a system matter tenfold more than the stuff that was made for the normies, right? That was made to sell books, that was made to entice people to learn more about the system. If you get stuck on that, you fell into a trap. You fell into a trap that was laid in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s to get people to buy books so that you can use that for intellectual power here in the present. And now you're stuck. Now you are absolutely stuck. You're going to get bored. You're not going to recognize that there's more to learn and more to understand within the system. And when you do try to understand it, you're going to shut it down because it's going to challenge you, and it's going to challenge all the times that you've told those people, you can't be this type because you're this type in this other system. And then what are you going to do? You're going to be stuck in that mindset forever. It's going to get boring. Nobody's going to listen to you. You're going to lose power over time unless you adapt and change to the truth. And the truth is, and anybody knows this in contemporary Enneagram circles, people that have studied this for 20, 30, 40 years, Naranjo himself knew this, Ichazo knew this. You have to look at where the types come from. What's the source of Enneagram? And for Enneagram, it's the defense of the ego. It's the defense strategies that make you feel safe from dying, essentially. Right? That's the ego types. And then we can look at the what drives you, or the instinctual types, which is a little bit different, but it's still among the same line. It's just what you're driven to do to feel safe. And that's why it goes so well with the ego types, because it's like, well, what part of life are you driven towards exploring or thinking about or tracking? And then how do you defend your ego? Or what part of your ego do you believe needs offended? That's the core part of Enneagram. That's what you should be looking at when you type yourself. And that's what professional typists who have been doing this for years and charge big bucks, that's what they're looking at. They're trying to get to your core motivations. They're not looking at you and seeing, oh, this person cares about helping others, therefore they're a 2. That's a shortcut you can use. And you can very well be on your merry way after you see somebody helping. Maybe they're helping a lot, right? Fine, they're a 2, move on. And I would say maybe 60-70% of the time they are a 2. But for the people that are interested in the truth, and being accurate 99% of the time rather than just 70% of the time, and people who are not interested in just waving their intellectual "I'm better than you" flag over others, they know this. They know that you have to dig. You have to dig at people's core motivations. You have to dig at what makes them tick. You have to dig at truly expanding someone's mind so that they can see the personality and see what they've put on themselves as an ego shield, right? We're trying to make that known. That's the whole point of Enneagram. So not only are you wrong if you're a contradiction obsessed person, but you completely miss the point of Enneagram. And the reason I'm using Enneagram as an example is because that's the major issue in this new upcoming typology world. And they have shut out anybody who is not in agreement with them. That's how you know a movement is toxic. If somebody instantly shuts you out because you don't agree with their thing that they've decided is 100% the truth, and they won't listen to you at all, and then they'll make fun of you and have power over you, that's your gleamingly obvious red flag that something's wrong with them and it's going to crash and burn eventually. And that's exactly what's happening. So, back to the rant. Let's look at, okay, so now we've understood what the core components of a type is, of Enneagram. What are the core components of MBTI, right? It's how you judge and perceive things. You go type in MBTI in Google. Myers-Briggs. What's the first thing you're going to say? It's going to say things like, well, this is a theory about how you perceive and judge the world, and whether you perceive first or judge first. And then you're going to see all these profiles for the types, and you're going to see cognitive functions and how you perceive and judge the world, yada yada. You're going to get to a place where you can read about the types, and that's where most people go first, right? Because that is the tool that sells the system. That's the tool that gives you a hint of what it's about and entices you so that you will learn more about it. But like I said, 90% of people stop there. Even the people that are supposedly part of this typology community, that's where they stop. You want to know why? The answer's easy. Because instead of digging for themselves, they take the word of who seems to be the authority and in charge. Well, that person over there made a video about how all these things contradict. And that person is well liked by others in the community, so they must be correct. They seem to have power. They seem to know what they're talking about. If I go against them, I'm going to be crucified, so I better not. I better just agree with whatever they say. This mindset is so limiting and boring, right? I've already ranted about that, so I'm going to refrain from murdering your guys' ears. But this is what stops most people from getting to the core components of the system. And for Myers-Briggs, again, it's your cognition, how you perceive and judge the world, and which one you do first, and in which alignment your cognitive functions are in. So this is a different core component than what Enneagram is about. So for those of you that value introverted thinking and socionics, this is an obvious thing to you, right? Systems have rules. You have to stay inside the rules of that system, or you're not talking about that system anymore. Very obvious. So for Myers-Briggs, you're looking at cognition, how you perceive and judge the world. That's how you figure out the types. All the other meaningless shit that's description oriented, and this person said this about this type, and this person said that about how that type looks, and how this type does this thing and this action out in the world. Sure, those are all hints in what the type might be, but that is not what's going on at the core. And if somebody looks and acts like maybe an ESTJ, but then you sit them down and you start to figure out what their unconscious processes are and how they perceive the world, and they're describing their perceptions of the world to you, and it's SE, you mistype them, right? They might look like an ESTJ. They are a different behavioral manifestation of SE. And that's also where we have to understand is that if we're going to divide the entire world how you can perceive the entire world into four perceptions, SE, SI, NE, and NI. Okay, divide everything, infinity, by 4. What do you get? It's huge. It's vast. You don't think there's many ways that this can manifest? Sure, there's going to be a main way that maybe 70% of people manifest this way, but then there's 30% where people manifest this other way. And that applies to every single function, right? So if we have 8, chances are a couple, if it's 30%, which I don't really know what the percentages are, I just know it's not 100%, people are going to have weird manifestations of their types. It just is what it is, but they're still going to be perceiving and judging the world in the way that MBTI describes it. They're just not fitting the author's interpretation of what that will look like via behaviors and impressions. Does this make sense? For those of you that get it, get it. You 100% are going to be like, that makes sense. For those of you that don't, check yourself, because these are logical fallacies. It's the fallacy of composition and division. You think since 1, 2, 3, 4 people fit a description, everybody has to fit that description to be that type, right? Or that since these people, let's say 5 people fit the, so we'll just go with the example I've used, 5 people fit the 4 cognitive functions, or the way that they perceive and judge the world, they fit TESI, right? TE is their leading, SI as their secondary. They're ESTJs. All 5 of these people are track stars, or I don't know. All 5 of these people are managers at their company, or they're just managing type people. They love to manage people. And you're going to say, if you're one of these people, if you're not, wonderful, you're going to say all ESTJs manage people. And if you don't manage people, you're not an ESTJ. And also, since this description says that ESTJs manage people and they're managerial and that's their trait, then everybody else that doesn't manage people is not an ESTJ. So you're claiming that one part of the system accounts for the entire part of it, even though it does not represent the core part of the system. Because there could be an ESTJ that comes along that doesn't manage people, isn't a manager, but is still thinking, still judging the world in terms of extroverted thinking, and still perceiving it through introverted sensing. This does exist. This does happen. That's why descriptions, and anybody who writes descriptions, any author knows this, that's why they're open. They're open-ended. That's why they're very long, too. Right? You can't write a description. You can't divide people into 16 types and cover all of humanity and all the different variations in humanity that exist. You just can't do it. So long descriptions, they aren't talking about one person. They're talking about millions of different people and trying to catch the typical patterns that you see. But typical, think of the word typical. What does that mean? Typical. That means it happens a lot, but not always. What does contradiction mean? Contradiction means that these two things cannot exist in the same space. So these two words are not compatible. So you can't call it a contradiction, which also means you can't run up to somebody that you don't know, that you see has 2 different types listed on their profile, wherever it may be, and be like, you can't be that. That doesn't exist. You're uneducated. Or make them feel bad, being rude, nasty, condescending, all because you based your entire understanding on the composition and division fallacy, which is exactly what this is. You can't do it. If you want to be educational, if you want to understand how systems work at the core level, if you want to create your own system, if you want to start doing the scientific method to understand and to categorize people and try to come up with, a theory of systems to put them in there, you have to get rid of this very common and pervasive logical falsehood, really, is what I want to call it. I don't even want to call it fallacy. It's just like straight up false. And that's one of the formal logical fallacies, which means that it is always applicable. The informal fallacies, it's like, sometimes they're applicable, sometimes they're not. It really depends on the situation. But for the formal ones, it's always untrue. It's always a bad idea to use them. So that's the rant. Contradictions are bullshit. Anyone who is holding contradictions over your head, making you feel bad, trying to get you to give your power away to them and be weak minded, don't listen to them. It is so pervasive right now. It's going to fail. It's going to fall. All those people who have said this thing are eventually going to change their mind and change their tune once they realize it. So, best advice I can have for you, the listener, is ignore it. Don't pay attention to it. Make up your own mind. I'm not even trying to get you to be like, follow what I say. I have the answer. I don't. I'm wrong all the time. And that's the most important part. You have to adopt the idea that you could be wrong. And anybody who is not adopting that idea, and you can tell, and trust me, humans, we have a beautiful intuition to understand when somebody's doing this. We just tend to ignore it because we're scared. When you feel that in somebody else, when you have that intuition, don't even engage. Just get away from them. Make up your own mind. Go digging in the systems. If you love typology, then go learn more about it and start to understand like the hierarchy that I was talking about. Like if you read a system and you're like, hey, these descriptions are wonderful. I love them. They make sense to me. This is so interesting. I like the archetypes that I'm thinking about. Go deeper. Be like, okay, how do these archetypes come to be? How did this person, like, how did Naranjo decide that this is what made the archetype? Who was he talking to? And what were the patterns that he saw that made him think this? And start searching for your own. It's very easy to do. You just have to keep questioning and thinking and researching and digging deeper and never coming to a conclusion or using it to gain power in the social realm. Like, how boring is that? Do you really want to do that? Like, leave that to the narcissists. Leave that to people who have, like, very tiny, like, insecure egos that just can't deal with ever being wrong or losing power. Whatever. You're not that type of person. You're just being controlled by that type of person. So get away from them. So that's my plea. This is my rant. Contradictions are bullshit. I'm sure I will have more to say. I might even make a follow-up video. Actually, I don't know if I mentioned it, but this is the comment that, and I get comments like this all the time. This is the comment that finally just pushed me over the edge to be like, I need to make a video, because how rude to come to me, somebody who has learned about the system and continues learning for like 8 years. I've studied with Catherine Faber. I've studied all of Rizzo's stuff. I've studied all of Naranjo's stuff, all of Ichazo's stuff, constantly learning and expanding. And for someone to really come and say that, it's just, come on. Come on. Don't try that. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video. Comments are going to be open. I know I'm going to get a lot of flack, but I'm just going to tell you to rewatch the video if you missed the parts that were important. For those of you who are looking to get typed in AP, want to do a typing session with me, the link will always be in the description. I also have opened up the Typology Vault for those of you who want to see me making videos, typing actors, actresses, famous people, pointing out where I think certain attitudes are going. Want to learn more? If you want to join the Discord, just join the Typology Vault. It's $16.99 a month. I'm also doing video submissions. You guys have seen those on my channel where you can make a video and send it in to me, and I will type you in everything. If you want to do the full typing, I can show you where I see Enneagram and AP and all the subtypes and the new reworked instinct system that I'm working on. And yeah, send that in. That's $150. It can be up to an hour long, and then my response is like an hour and a half usually if it's that long. Sometimes 2 hours if it goes super long. So that's all I got. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and